Hello friends, welcome to the Soviet Journey channel. At this station of our journey, I will tell you about the Red Corner, a little known issue in the Soviet Union. I know there are people who have just heard this name. Yes, you heard right. There was a special place called the Red Corner in venues in the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries after World War II. In most homes, educational institutions or cultural centers, a room was configured in a special way called the Red Room. These rooms were also called Lenin Corner or Lenin Room. These monumental places for educational purposes. It could be seen in factories, schools, party buildings, collective farming facilities, or in the home of any Soviet citizen with a deep love for communism. Inside these rooms, there were usually red flags representing the working class, portraits of Marx and Lenin, and a library with rich contents. Numerous works on Marxism were kept here and served to convey class consciousness to people. Many issues have become a part of daily life in the Soviets, and many routines that do not exist in other Western countries have taken an important place in the lives of Soviet people. I have previously published a video on this subject called Lifestyle in the Soviets. Friends who want to examine in detail the differences between Soviet people and people in Western countries can watch that video from the link I placed at the top right. The topic of the Red Corner will be of interest to many of our viewers interested in the Soviet Union. I wanted to tell you about these special rooms, which were established to raise the education level of the Soviet people and where the entire history of humanity, from the primitive communal society to the age of socialism, is explained scientifically and class-wise. This culture, which started in the Soviet geography with the October Revolution and was then seen in Eastern Europe after World War II and in many countries during the Cold War, is worth examining. Let's go into a little more detail and take a look at the Red Corner issue. Red Corner is pronounced Krasny Ugolok in Russian. It comes from the combination of the word Ugolok, meaning corner where classes are held, and the word Krasny, meaning red, meaning related to revolutionary activities. However, when we look at the origin of this expression, we see a historical tradition among the Eastern Slavs. With a similar expression, Krasny Ugol, people of the Eastern Slavic Christian faith had a place in the corners of their houses, that is, in their Ugol, where there was a prayer table facing southeast. It is also written in various sources that this tradition existed in the pre Christian period of the Eastern Slavic peoples. This traditional term has no exact equivalent in Western European languages. The closest meaning is red club, recreation room, or reading room. These red corners, which have been in history for centuries, and the red corner in the Soviet period have a semantic rhyme, and by combining a tradition that already existed in society with socialist culture, it took its historical place in a new sense. The creation of red corners began in the 1920s, after the October Revolution, to provide literacy lessons in rural areas where the majority of the population was illiterate. For this reason, there were usually many books in the red corners, and the red corners often served as a library in the villages. In these rooms, collective newspaper readings and conversations on socially important issues were held. Reading clubs in remote villages served a similar function. Along with literacy education, education was given on the place of the working class and peasantry in human history, the situation of the oppressed classes in all ages, and socialism. The people who have a say in local governments, they usually held their meetings in these corners built in the largest building and gave countless speeches about living with the goal of communism and increasing social productivity. Over the years, these educational and information corners continued to be established in thousands of settlements, and by the 1960s there were red corners in almost every establishment. With the increase in education and the rise in the welfare of the Soviet people, these red corners were now transformed into museum-like Lenin rooms, and after this date, they generally began to be called by this name. After this process, red corners, it was replaced by Lenin rooms, whose rules were more clearly defined regarding what to do inside. Since the next generation, which was uneducated during the revolutionary years, was raised within the Soviet system, there was no need for a full-scale educational campaign. Therefore, the red corners were used to convey Lenin's teachings to the new generation and to introduce them to the ideals of socialist society. In these rooms, the aim of building a new society in the Soviet Union was explained with the October Revolution, and the aim of creating a society freed from traditional conservatism and raised with a progressive and organized approach was conveyed to the public. At the same time, theoretical teachings were also included, and especially Marxism and Lenin's contributions to Marxism were explained. In other words, the subjects that Lenin added to classical Marxism, such as the vanguard party, imperialism, the dictatorship of the proletariat, democratic centralism, and self-determination, were taught in the red corners. For example, the contribution to the basic historical theory of the struggle of the working class is the most well-known. The proletariat, which Marx described as the only class and that will establish a classless society, will naturally establish a kind of party in which it will establish and fight. According to Marx, this party is a party from within the working class that emerged from the contradictions of capitalism as a historical necessity, and this party is an instrument of the socialist revolution. The proletariat itself makes the revolution. Regarding the will to carry out the revolution, Lenin stated that the proletariat under the leadership of a disciplined communist party was the structure that could carry out the revolution, and replace the vague nature of the proletarian organization with the concept of the vanguard party. This special historical role of the party has always been explained in the red columns, as it is emphasized that the Communist Party is an indispensable condition for the transition to the dictatorship of the proletariat. Of course, if we go into all the issues explained in the red corners, we cannot get out of the situation, and we need to convey the entire Marxist-Leninist corpus here. Of course, we don't have time for this. What needs to be known is that red corners have an important place in the Soviets and Eastern Bloc countries and have a historical place in socialist culture. Yes, comrades, in this video I explained to you a Soviet tradition known as the red corner. I wanted comrades who are interested in Soviet history to know about these educational institutions that are part of the Soviet way of life. We can say that the Lenin Room phenomenon is a reflection of Soviet symbolism that has become an accepted tradition among the people. In this video, I tried to explain what you are wondering about this subject. I hope you enjoyed our informative video on the subject and that we received a like from you. If you have anything you would like to add on the subject, please write it in the comments below and let's discuss it together. On our Soviet Journey channel, I publish many documentary-like videos about the Soviets and world socialist movements. For friends who want to watch our other documentary videos, I leave the link to all our documentaries on the top right. You can watch them from there. Many topics related to the Soviets are waiting to be told again, and we will continue to tell you about many topics in the future. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to be informed about us. Goodbye for now. Stay in solidarity.